Hi, everybody. I'm Professor Jeff Sauer, Director of the Texas Tech English Media Lab, and today I'm going to be showing you a little bit about the research we're doing now in August 2025 on generative AI and its role in English departments. You may have heard some things already. You know probably the generative AIs, like this one that we're running on a research server, so this is a workstation in our media lab, are often accused of being unethical for a number of reasons. These general rules tend to apply to corporate generative AIs running on large server farms. Our system here is running on a Mac Studio in the Media Lab itself in Humanities 362. That machine takes as little as 6 watts of power when idling, and at max tends not to run above 65 watts. And that's basically the electricity from a light bulb when I was a kid. So ethically, our system, which is open source and much smaller than the generative AIs you may have read about, is far more environmentally sustainable than those. It's also more ethical from an intellectual property perspective. The new ChatGPT engine, GPT-5, which came out this week, has a database that's reportedly 50 trillion parameters in size. That's an enormous database, which is logged in. It's imported content from a wide variety of sources, including some that news reports suggest don't have the permission of the authors. But the systems we're looking at here in the Media Lab are much smaller. They're 12 billion parameters or 20 billion parameters. Our largest is 70 billion parameters. And so these systems contain a fraction of 1% as much intellectual property as the large leading edge models use. As a result, there's no incentive for these small models to collect the intellectual property from all those sources, and then it's simply not big enough to contain all of that. And so I think ethically, for a number of reasons, the systems we're researching here in the Media Lab are far superior to those in commercial server farms. That said, this system still works pretty well. This is running one of Anthropic's open source this is running OpenAI's open source model, GPT OSS. If I say hi to it, think for a second, and then it'll reply back to me. You can expose what it thought. It will give you the reply. You can copy its reply, and it'll have some follow-up questions you could ask it. I could ask it to tell me, describe to me the significance of the vivid detail language in Charles Dickens's novel Bleak House. So, and it will, as you can see, reply pretty much like any of the generative AIs you may have seen so far. It'll write a general introduction at the sort of Wikipedia level about the details of the kind of language that's used by Dickens in Bleak House. I don't know how many of you like that novel, but I find it enormously careful in its language, which it seems this answer more or less seems to recognize. So yeah, we've got here a general generative AI answer. And because this model is running in our Media Lab, there is zero cost to any user who tries it. So we can research different ways to set parameters and settings that will adjust how the system will respond. I can adjust settings like top K and top P, context length, and other settings you've probably never experimented with in generative AIs before. This would get to be expensive if you were using commercial systems. The cost per million tokens, output tokens, in OpenAI can run as high as $150 per million tokens. And that means you could, if you were researching generative AIs, run up bills of thousands of dollars per month. You may see some stories about people who've done that by accident, not realizing the cost that they were accruing. And we're not limited to use one open source LLM. We have 18 of them, I think, installed right now inside the Media Lab. And so we can vary to try to see how different models would actually answer in various different questions as we start to think about what an ethical generative AI use inside an English department might be. Lots of you have probably heard stories about plagiarism that students can perform when they're using generative AIs to try to answer, to do their assignments for classes. We're not, I mean, obviously we're worried about that. In my classes, I forbid AI use for class assignments, but that doesn't mean that there is no ethical use of these sorts of systems for writing. I think I'm tempted to think of Gustave Flaubert, who argued that there is no such thing as writing, there's only rewriting. Flaubert argued that everybody's first drafts are terrible, and that whatever you put down to begin with just gives you a framework and a layout for the material you're going to get when you actually do the work of writing. The actual work of writing is going through the obvious, unsubtle, unsophisticated things that come out in your first draft of any text, like the ones that these Gen AIs produce. And that then the quality of writing comes from discovering and thinking about tacit or undeveloped ideas, which may be much more interesting that emerge from the details of the first draft. That by continuing to work on the piece, you make something that ends up being interesting, even if it isn't at first. And it seems to me there may be some ways in which these generative AIs may be part of a process in which that would be possible. Okay, so we've got text-based generative AIs. We also have experimental open source software. I've got here a prototype of a presentation website. I could say create a slideshow about the significance of the vivid, detailed language in Dickens's Not Bleak House. How many slides should we make? Let's just make it a brief one. We'll make 5 slides. Okay, and I could drop in here then notes or sketches or ideas that I've already had that it can then incorporate into part of its argument. But even if I don't do that with just a short 1-sentence prompt, this system will then go to one of the open source engines, not the same one we had loaded before, so it's going to take a sec for it to start to load. But then it will start to generate 5 slides for us with content about detailed, vivid language in Dickens's Bleak House. You can see it sketching out here slides 1, 2, and 3, thinking about what it wants to put on slide 4 and slide 5. We'll then expand that to show you its plan for these slides, and you could rearrange them, or you could delete a slide, or you could change some text if there was something you wanted to change in this draft. If you click down here, you could select the visual design you want for your style. So you could use a dark style or a general style. I'm going to click general style, I think, here. And we ask the system to generate the slideshow. And it will now make these slides from AI-generated content following the prompt that I've given the system. With these sorts of systems running on our workstations, we're both using the multimedia workstations which already existed in that space to run software, servers, that will make our students, our graduate student researchers, our faculty researchers, and our colleagues around the country who are working with us on research projects be able to study and to examine state-of-the-art, new and emerging technologies, and to think about why they're important to English departments, and to produce arguments about how it is that people inside of English departments should think about these sorts of tools. Once it's done creating the slides, it will then go to an open source image source. So it'll grab some images for the slides to make them a little bit visually more interesting. And once it's created those, you could now ask it to export, and it would give you a PowerPoint file or a PDF with this design slide show. We can do text, we can do slideshows, and we're experimenting with a variety of kinds of multimodal content. But in order for those of us who are researching the field of English to lead English in new directions, we have to not just read articles in the New York Times or the Atlantic about generative AI. We've actually got to get our hands on these sorts of systems and experiment with and see what it is they're able to do, what they can do well, what they do poorly, and how it and make then we can produce arguments, scholarly arguments, to help the entire country, the world, move forward in thinking about new issues inside of multimedia. So that's what we're doing in August 2025. I hope you found it interesting. Please feel free to take a look at other content, other work that we're doing in the Media Lab, and I'll hope to see you soon. Thanks.